Good morning. This is the JP Dinnell podcast, episode 123. I'm JP Dinnell, and as always, I have Lucas with me. Hope is not a course of action. The lesson is one as old as time. Be prepared. For most of human history, one did not have a choice. One had to be prepared to survive. Your life and the lives of your family and tribe, the very preservation of society depended on it. You also had to be good at two things: fighting and hunting. So I am reading the foreword to the book Prepared by Mike Glover. And the foreword was actually written by Jack Carr. I really enjoy this forward. A lot of little different things that I think we could dive upon, especially with what's going on right now in the United States with the weather. This cold front coming through is kind of crazy. Modern life, particularly in the West, is marked by comfort and a detachment from what Jack London called the law of club and fame, unknown in the annals of human history. Today, it is possible to stumble through life with blinders on, shield from the harsher realities that were inescapable just a century ago. Grocery stores are never empty of food, for the most part. Gas stations are always open, for the most part, and fuel available. Air conditioning and heating units insulate us from the environment. Mechanics keep your car running. Electricians and plumbers can be called to maintain your home. Banks safeguard your money. In the Western world, life can run fairly smoothly. That is, until calamity strikes. So, I mean, obviously, everything he was saying is accurate. I agree with, and I added in those for the most parts, which I probably just should not have, because as we get to this in here, it explains like, yeah, hey, all those things are supposed to be good to go until it's not. So the calamity may appear in the form of a natural disaster, a medical emergency, or a violent crime. Modern societal impulses encourage us to call 911 in the event of an emergency. Someone will be there to answer the call and send police officers, firefighters, or EMTs to the rescue. Or will they? Will those first responders be there in time to fend off an assault, put out a fire, or apply a tourniquet? Or will they arrive after the event to take reports and clean up the mess? As the saying goes, the police are minutes away when seconds count. Whose responsibility is it to protect you and your loved ones? Whose responsibility is it to be ready? Unless you are a politician with taxpayer funded 24/7 security, I can tell you the answer is it is ours. As citizens, we have responsibilities that extend beyond paying taxes. We have a responsibility to our families, our communities, and our country to be assets, not liabilities. That means we need to train. So there's a lot of other good little lines in here. I really like that last part. I know I've talked about it on the podcast a few times. We have a responsibility to our families, our communities, and our country to be assets and not liabilities. That means we need to train. So, you staying warm over there, buddy?
Bro, we are doing our best. Talking about preparedness, this was one of those when we look back to the storms we had in 2021, where our home, we were without power for like 4 days,
Yeah.
which we had no control over. The one thing we did have control over was how far ahead of time we decided that we weren't going to just drip our faucets, that we were just going to have a little bit of a steady stream and pay the price for it whenever the bill came around. Um we the one controllable that we really had that we took care of prevented all of the galvanized pipes in our house that was built in the 30s from bursting when we were constantly making calls the next few days after everybody's houses started to thaw out to go help out some friends and neighbors. So it's it's in the little, like, even the smallest details, doing the smallest thing that you can to be prepared can
Yeah.
pay huge dividends in it. And that was a big lesson for us last time around. And this time around, going and making sure that we had chatted with our friends and relatives who are close. We were like, hey, if we end up losing power, you know, you might have a few house guests for a few days as long as y'all are good with it. So,
Yeah,
and luckily, yourself and some others were like, yeah, come on.
yeah, come on. Um, there's another line in here I like, but mere survival is not the goal. The goal is to prevail. That means recognizing the need to be prepared and then doing what is necessary to get there. It is not enough to have a fire extinguisher, a trauma kit, and a firearm. We must know how to use them. So, um, and to me, that's just thinking, critical thinking, the power of being able to think and critically think and, just talk through and think through worst case scenarios, understanding and knowing your house and all the things. And, for me, we bought this house 2 years ago and there's still like little things I'm like learning about the house and, you know, going into like knowing the storm was coming, I was like, okay, I've got to be very intentional with getting these things prepared and lined up. And Amanda and you and other people like kind of helping out when I was gone, like was important. Um, I was talking with Corey Mize, who works at Echelon Front, and just checking in on her and other teammates that I know are like kind of in this like path of the storm. And they're in the Mississippi area. Amanda's aunt's still there, and so is her brother. And her aunt and her brother have been fine, but, Corey and her family, she, was telling me, like, they're about an hour to 90 minutes away from the Memphis, Tennessee area down in Mississippi. If you're to go southeast, probably near like Tupelo area, I think. But they've been without power and water, and they will most likely be without power and water for another week or longer. So her and her husband and their kids are headed to family to stay there. And she, we were texting, she was just checking in. I was checking in on her and she told me that she's like, "Yeah, doing dishes using boiling water over the stove is a new appreciation for, you know, the dishwasher and power and all those things." Now, fortunately, their house has a gas stove, which is important. So if you do lose power, okay, no factor. You still have the gas and the ability to use that stove.
Yeah, we last year during some of the heavy winter stuff, we were having some plumbing work done, and our plumber did not put the cover for the crawl space back on the house.
Mm,
That's right under the kitchen sink, and so they had rerun all the lines, but they hadn't attached them. So we had dripped water, but the drip was still so slow that our hot water pipe, that galvanized pipe, froze underneath the house. And so we were having to do that same thing. Matter of fact, there were sometimes when we were considering just like scooping snow from outside to try to
yeah,
boil it to do that. But um, eventually, we had a buddy who had a torch, and we just climbed up underneath the house and slowly warmed that pipe back up to make sure that it didn't burst,
yeah.
and did that. And it's wild to think that there are some parts of the country where this is the norm and others where it's
Oh, yeah.
completely, foreign to us. And, the 3 days out of the year that, we might have uh, a storm or something of this nature, even though this wasn't like a massive storm like what we had a few years ago, just the slow, steady drizzle of freezing rain and then snow and stuff on top of it, that the communities just don't have the infrastructure to deal with that.
Yeah.
But one of the things I was talking to my friends in Canada about the first time we had a massive winter storm here was they don't know how to deal with, the 104-degree days, right? If they were to have a massive thing of a 104-degree days, like their roadways and all of their infrastructure would fail pretty quick because it's not meant to withstand that kind of heat. Whereas, the reverse is definitely the case down here. And so preparedness comes from, I think, and Glover talks about it a little bit in his book. Obviously, he referenced Jack London, which is, White Fang and Call of the Wild and all of these books that I remember reading as a young man. And definitely, I was like, I'm going to live in Alaska and build my own igloo. And, I'm going to
Yeah.
have a giant St. Bernard and hunt wolves for the rest of my life kind of books. But that they do make you at least aware of things that you'll need to do in case of certain situations, like when the winter storm comes. Um, when you see it on the radar, or when the first prediction of it happens, I would say when you check the Farmer's Almanac, but that doesn't exist anymore, which is sad because they did a phenomenal job of predicting the weather.
I think it
Um,
went digital, right?
it may have. I would need to verify that, but I know that
I
they
think so.
certainly aren't doing the printed anymore, which is a
I
bummer.
I got the last printed one
Did you really?
here for Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, that's rad, man. But you go to Costco, or you go to Walmart or Sam's Club, or any of these stores that you are anticipating are going to have everything that you need. And if you go the last minute, their bakeries are shut down. There's no bread on the shelves. We made, like, I told Kirsten, hey, you may need to just like prep for some stuff. So get a couple of loaves of bread ready, um, and just get ready to bake them. And I was walking down the shelves at Walmart because we had to pick up some medicine. And as we were walking down, like, there's no bread, there's no tortillas,
Yeah.
there are no water bottles
Well, it's
anywhere in that aisle. Like all of and this was the other weird thing, like all of the Walmart brand soda was gone. Right? There was a few of like the real bougie name brand sodas, like those were still left on the shelves. Nobody wanted to pay for their, $15 12 pack of like super nice soda. The other thing that was really interesting is like if you were to go to the beer section, right? If you're walking by the alcohol section, all of that, the most stocked up that has ever been, right? The craft beers, all of those things are like overflowing. But if you go to where the essentials are, that that that's where the shelves were wiped off, and the inexpensive things are what people were taking. And it's just one of those things that kind of sticks out to me, is that in these moments where we feel like we have to be prepared for something, it's amazing how quickly we shift to the essentials. Whereas, 3 weeks ago, if you would have told somebody like, hey, you need to, you could save a little money by not getting name brand soda. They're like, no, I would never do that. And then the winter storm comes and they're like, no, I drink 72 sodas, in the course of a week. I'm going to have to, have to buy something. I don't know what I'm going to get into. And it's
yeah,
just crazy how that mind shift happens.
I think also it just shows, like, there's not a lot of logic going on because people are just panic buying, and it's like all these things like, we would joke back when we lived in North Mississippi, because when this happens, like, 1 or 2 times a year, it's the same thing. We joke about how everyone's gonna be eating French toast for a few weeks because everyone buys all the bread and all the eggs and milk, and you're just like, "What? Okay, I don't understand, why do you have to go buy a massive amount of all these things?" It's just a panic thing, like, you told your wife, like, "Hey, get a loaf or 2 of bread, like, make sure we're good for, a week for sandwiches," but you also have a family of 4 that are gonna eat sandwiches. It's easy to maintain. You can do peanut butter and jelly, you do meat and cheese, and you could do a few of those a day and be fine if you had to, and it's, like,
Yeah. Or
no
just toast
factor.
with breakfast, right?
Yeah,
Just keep something in your body and
yeah, but
nourish, and you're good.
I think a lot of, what I'm hearing you say as you're talking through all, like, what you did in the store and what you saw is, like, when people don't have a plan, you know, that they act off of emotions, and, like, those emotions are usually never a good initial plan or idea. It's like, "All right, let's think through this." We knew the storm was coming, and, I had travel contingency set in place, and, I was not able to record with Andy because if I would have stayed up in Montana, my flight had gotten canceled on Friday and it was pushed to Saturday, and they were already talking about moving it to Sunday. And I was like, "No, I'm not gonna be up there while my wife and kids are down here dealing with it." And, also wasn't sure when the actual flights would happen, if it would be Saturday, Sunday, or even, they talked about some flights not even happening until Monday, depending on where you're coming from and everything with DFW. And I was like, "Well, not worth the risk." So had an initial plan, had a contingency plan, but also before, like, the weather even started to shift, we looked at what we had and we're like, "Cool, these are things that we need. Awesome." Also, and that was just for, like, the regular week. We weren't, like, going out and, like, buying all this stuff, but then it was like, okay, if we were to not be able to leave for a week, or if the stores were closed for a week, what would we need for a week? Because it's not gonna, I mean, the likelihood of us being unable to go grab food for a week is super low, is super low. And so we're like, okay, well, we're going to plan, but we're not going to like over plan and complicate things, which is one of the things that Jocko and Leif talk about in dichotomy of leadership. Have a good plan, but don't over plan. Don't be emotional. But also knew like I had plenty of friends and people around here. We had resources. Josh and I were joking. We're like, all right, dude, like, okay. Like it was like a funny conversation of like, well, if this happens, okay, worst case, boom, this, worst case, this. And it was like one of those things where like, well, if you run out of water and, we're not able to like melt snow to use the toilets, like, okay, cool. Guess what? Go in the backyard, if we had to, but then, I was like, if we got to the point where, we're without power and we're having issues with plumbing, like, okay, how long do we hang out, go through it, and at what point you just load up the vehicles and drive a couple hours to another area that has power and you rent an Airbnb or, whatever, just like at what point do you make that call? And we were joking. I was like, bro, that would be my nightmare is loading up vehicles with all the dogs, you know what I mean? And then having to go, drive over a state or two. But it's like not a huge issue if we had to. But man, we didn't have any issues in this area. I know there were some areas in the DFW area that was, supposedly worse than others, but like I went to the store the other day, it was no factor. We made, the espresso blackout cookies that my dad had, created that recipe and Amanda makes them now as well. And we made those and brought them over. Me and the girls got out and brought them to Argyle PD. We went and picked up Wingstop and brought them like wings and fries and food and the cookies, and then Aiden's buddy spent the night, one night, and then the next day it was gonna be a little dicey for him to drive home, so he just stayed another day, and yesterday it was fun, a little learning experience for the boys, having Aiden's buddy Drew and him in his two-wheel drive pickup truck drive from Argyle down to Saginaw, but I drove with them in my car, just as a, safety precaution because it was a longer drive, and I had them load up a bunch of the bumper plates from my garage gym and put it in the back of his truck to have a little more traction and, was letting them work through Salton, um, our driveway area, parking area that his truck was stuck in. Cause, two-wheel drive trucks, you couldn't get out. And so letting them like dig out the snow and salt it and try to work through that stuff. I will say I did get to, other than just starting, you know, little fires in our backyard in the fire pit, that the blowtorch gun that Amanda got me, the little flamethrower, I
Bro,
gotta yeah, I gotta use that
so cool.
yesterday on the front gate because the front gate, the track had completely iced up, and so shoveled out as much as Aiden and I could with the shovel and a pickaxe, 'cause, the gate was working, but it wasn't, like, pulling or pushing because it kept coming off the track, and so we scraped as much of it away as we could, and then I freaking just turned that thing up as high as it could, and it just melted everything along, and then, of course, the metal track is heating up, so we just melted everything along it and cleaned it out, and it was good. Um, it was funny that I was just laughing. I was on the phone with Josh as, we were driving down to Saginaw, and I was driving in front of the boys, and I'm watching the rearview mirror, and I just see his truck go whoop. It just do like a 360, and then he's like stuck on the side. I'm like, all right, there's no cars coming. Let me back up. So I backed up towards them and was just kind of letting them work their way out of it and called them. I'm like, you guys good? They're like, yeah. And so I just was like talking them through the drive also, which was cool. Instead of me driving his truck, I just during certain times, I'm like, hey man, we're getting ready to go up over this bridge and this overpass. Just maintain momentum, keep some distance from me, but don't have too much momentum. So when you get up to the top, you want to be able to slow down because we got to turn left. You don't want to be sliding into that open area. And you could tell the boys were a little nervous, which is fine. Especially if you're 19 and you've never driven in this. Like, how would you know to drive in it? And it was a cool like teaching moment to like work them through these things real time, but they had to do it themselves. So it was good.
That's awesome, man. You know, when when I lived in Thunder Bay, I was in a two-wheel drive pickup, and so I would always keep. I had 300 pounds of salt, 100 pounds of sand, and then normally like a couple of logs in the back of my pickup truck, right?
Yeah.
And so I say logs; they were just like firewood
Yeah.
type things, um, in the back there. And the amount of times, luckily, we didn't have to use it very often, but you know, figuring out how to get yourself out of a sketchy situation, especially when you're in a two-wheel drive pickup that's going uphill in, we did in centimeters, but essentially a foot of snow that nobody's been on before. Like, hey, you get too far off the road one way or the other, like this is a
Yeah.
total vehicle hospital trip. Um, and the importance of like learning, like we've talked about before, desires versus capabilities. And this is one of the other things that I saw at the grocery store, and I kind of want to tap into this a little bit because while all of the bread aisle was nearly emptied, all the sodas and the bottled waters are nearly emptied. You know what? There was a ton of that was like hardly touched flour,
Oh, yeah, because people don't know how to make things anymore.
and
Well,
like
not everybody, but
right.
most people don't know how to, like, actually bake like, bread, tortillas, all those things.
Yeah, we've gotten so, and this is one of the things Glover was pointing out, like we've gotten so accustomed to the conveniences that we have that doing the things that even our moms and grandmothers did just, naturally.
Yep.
And for some of us, it might be further than that. It might be our grandmother and our great grandparents. Every bag of flour that you get has a bread recipe or a noodle recipe or something on the side of it. So even if you say, hey, I don't know how to do this, buy it and read the side of it or with the internet and all those kinds of things. So when it comes to preparedness, I think one of the big questions we have to ask ourselves is like, what are our capabilities? So what are some things that for you, when you think not just about like the practicality of preparing for weather or things like this, but as far as keeping yourself sharp and prepared, like what are some things that you do in order to do that, or like when you're instructing people, whether it's with long range shooting or whatever. Let's start with things for the winter storm. Is like, what are some things that you guys do with your family in order to keep yourselves sharp and prepared for if something were to happen, that you're able to keep food on the table and those kinds of things.
Well, you can't get complacent and just assume things are always going to be good to go wherever you're at. It blows me away that there are adults that don't check the weather and look a week ahead for your area. Like, it's just crazy to me. And I'm not saying anything bad about those people that do. I'm just saying it blows me away. Like, legitimately, I don't understand. If you are an adult and you have a family, why would you not be checking your weather just to see what the forecast is, just so you can have some awareness of, hey, this is where I live, this is where my family is. You should be aware that there might be some issues with weather, but not everyone thinks that way. So for me, it's just, I think it's more so of like having this mindset of just looking ahead, thinking strategically, not getting, you know, just in the day-to-day routine of like, "Oh, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing." Now I know obviously part of that is my background of what I did in the SEAL teams, but I was always that way as a kid. I was always looking at weather and thinking ahead and planning out routes, and, like, I used to love, like, if we're taking a family trip, I'd pull up the maps and look at maps and look at different areas. I think, if you're talking about an actual practical thing, like, you should own some hard copy maps and understand how to read a map, at least for, the major freeways and interstates, or, know how to get around in your areas without GPS. I know GPS is great because you can do the auto updates. It'll auto update based off of traffic, and I do run GPS even when I'm driving to places that I always go, because it has saved me on, like, accidents or traffic, but I'm also not just blindly following the GPS. Like, I am looking and scanning for the streets, I'm reading the streets, and so, again, it's a situational awareness type of thing, and I think, as adults and young adults, we should all be more intentional with increasing our situational awareness, which means looking around, actually like reading out signs, be like, okay, cool. Hey, this sign is here. The next major road is this. You come up to that road, confirming those things. Um, I, you know, I will never be at a point where my family doesn't have at least one four-wheel drive vehicle. I and that's just my thing is like, hey, I wanna be able to at least have one vehicle that always allows us to load and go. Like, if we have to load up and go, like, we're gonna be good to go. Now, I know not everybody can afford four-wheel drive vehicles, okay? If you can't, have a set of chains for your vehicle. Now, that's one of the things I took for granted living in Northern California because my dad didn't always have four-wheel drive vehicles, but we had chains that we could put on the tires and we could go to Lake Tahoe, we could go up in the mountains, no matter what the weather was, we could drive and we could get wherever we needed to be. So, I think in having the ability to drive through, uh, bad weather is really important as well. But going back to your question of, like, desiring capabilities, what are you teaching people? I think the big thing is just learning how to think strategically, big picture, which means that you actually have to take some time to think about, hey, what's a week look like? What's this month look like? What are things forecasted? I mean, think about that from a business aspect. If you're always just in the tactical day to day operations, you're probably, I can't say you will, but you probably will end up off the mark because you have to be looking at, okay, what am I strategically trying to accomplish and how do I work my way back to that? And so that means carving time into your day to actually sit, review, analyze, process that information, and then think, okay, hey, what adjustments do I need to make if I'm going to hit that end goal, which is 6 months down the road, 18 months down the road, 5 years down the road. You have to be able to think in different aspects, like, hey, what are my short term, midterm, long term, and really long term types of goals? And those should all be, as they're being accomplished, adding upon the previous ones to get you closer to that goal.
Yeah, man. It's easy for us to kind of point at a few things, be like, oh, you need to have at least a couple of meals that you feel like you can prepare, and make see how many things you can do with a rotisserie chicken or with a bag of flour, like whatever. But those ideas and those things only apply so often to when you are caught unaware. Preparedness is so much more than that. One of the stories we were talking about before we got online is an old farm adage about a farmhand. And the simple version of the story goes that there was a farmhand. He worked for a farmer for years and years, and then one day he told the farmer, we got some things happening with my family. I've got to head back there, to help take care of my mom and dad. Can you write me a letter of recommendation? And so the farmer does. And the very first farm that that guy comes to, he goes to the biggest farm because it's likely that the bigger the farm, the more they're going to be able to pay. And he comes in, introduces himself to the farmer, tells him his story. And he goes, "I brought a letter of recommendation and contact information for the guy who hired me last." And immediately, right on the spot, he gets the job. And he works there for a few years, and then becomes the guy who's the head hand at this new farm. And him and the farmer were talking one day, and he goes, "Just out of curiosity, what was written on that letter of recommendation?" And it was just this one simple sentence. It says, "He sleeps in the storm." And if you've ever worked with animals at all, or maybe you've had backyard chickens, and the first like hint of a storm, or you hear thunder or something, or it starts raining, then you panic and jump out of bed because you don't remember if you locked the coop, or now you got to get the blankets on the horses, or that all these kinds of things have to happen in order to preserve your crops or your livestock or whatever in the storm. Well, this guy wouldn't have to do any of that because he knew what he was about. He knew what was going on. He checked the weather. He'd taken care of everything so that whenever the storm hits, like his sleep is not bothered at all because he's already done all the preparation work. And that's been, something I've used in sermon illustrations. It's a story that, I'll often tell our young men whenever they're trying to figure out like, what are, what am I supposed to do? I don't, I've got all these things coming up, and you use that story. in order to kind of show them like, hey, part of the reason that you're in such a stressful situation right now is because you have failed to do the little things along the road to
Yeah.
prepare. And so, like when it comes to the practical side of preparedness, obviously, with books like Mike Glover's, we can see how to stay prepared in what might be potentially life altering situations, or things like the grid shuts down or any of that kind of stuff, right? But when it comes to the day to day, like how do I prepare for the next job interview that I have? How do I prepare for the presentation that I've got going on, that I have to do at the end of this quarter? Or how do I prepare for, let's say, a tough conversation, or to jump into a new leadership opportunity, or to address people? Like, what are practical steps for preparedness that people can use day out, day in and day out in their lives?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is, you have to be organized, which means that you have to look at your day, look at your week, look at your month, look at these projects. Like, and I'll go back to what I said earlier is like, you actually have to put time in your schedule to think. And I think that's the first step is like, think about, okay, hey, what do you have in front of you that you're trying to accomplish? Once you figured out what you're trying to accomplish, then you need to look at what like resources you have to accomplish said task. Start organizing your uh your day, your tools, your resources, all the things that you would be using, right? So, like you said, a presentation. Okay, cool. Do you have the information? Do you have like all the things that you need to be able to like do the task? You have to look like, okay, hey, I want to do this. Do I have these things? Yes or no? Go through the list. And so I know I say this often, but look at what you're trying to accomplish and then reverse engineer it back to where you're at. Hey, I'm going on a backpacking trip. We're going to, you know, climb, we wanna hit we wanna summit Mount Rainier. Okay, cool. Sounds great. I wanna do that. Well, can you do that? Do you have to have a guide or can you do it unguided? Okay, cool. What are those options? Well, we wanna do it with a guide. Okay, cool. Sounds good. That sounds safe because they know how to do it well. Alright, what does that cost? Okay, cool. This is what it costs per person. All right. So between now and September, I want to summit Mount Rainier. This is what it's going to cost for the guide. This is what it's going to cost estimated for my flight, hotel, rental car. Okay, cool. Do I have that in savings right now? Yes or no? Yep, cool. Set it aside. No. Okay. How much do I have to save every other week or every month to have that amount in there for when it comes time to pay for this event? All right. How many days are we going to be there? How many meals per day? All right. What's that going to cost of the meals that I have to freeze dried meals that I have to buy and or prepare myself? Do I have the ability to prepare my own meals? Nope. All right. What would that cost if I wanted to get a freeze dryer? Is it worth it? Yep. No, I don't know. Oh, cool. I have a buddy that has one. Maybe I'm going to have him do my meals and I'm going to pay him for it. So I'm like literally like I have to dissect everything down and then get organized by creating an actual task list. Okay, here's the things that I need to do. Line them out, write them out, and then, then start executing on what I can execute upon. All right, what's that physically going to look like? Okay, I have to start training for it. How far out should I be training for it? Do I need to do any altitude? So I'm thinking through these things instead of just going, screw it, let's just go do it. Now, there are some pretty epic things that you can do in life by just saying, hey, screw it, let's go do it. However, that's not the best plan. We should be planned. We should plan, we should be organized, and we have to, know that we have the capabilities through our training and through our gear and through our resources. And that's what brings comfort. That's what brings comfort. You're not worried and stressed about these different tasks.
Yeah, I mean, and you've said it all without saying it. I mean, this is prioritize and execute.
Yes,
That's what
100%.
Yeah, that's what this is wholly and completely. And one of the things I think is so interesting about when we're prioritizing and executing, I've heard Jocko talk about this, I've heard you talk about this as well, that it's easy to look at something 6 months down the road and to say that there are things today that aren't a priority because this thing is 6 months away. You can either look at this thing that's 6 months away and never prioritize it until like the 3 days before it has to get done, or
Yeah.
you can begin to prioritize a little of it at a time. One of the things that both of y'all have said is that you'll oftentimes look at the thing that's farthest out and
Yep.
give that priority over the things you have to do tomorrow, because the things you have to do tomorrow are getting done regardless.
Yep.
You know, the podcast is getting done no matter what, right? If if it has to be done. But if you've got something 6 months from now, you might spend an hour on that today and
Yep.
then know that the podcast is kind of getting done regardless. So when it comes to prioritizing and executing, especially things that are let's say that they're 90 days plus down the line, how do you approach prioritizing and executing those things so that, for lack of a better way to put it, even though it's an imminent thing, that it doesn't sneak up on you?
We have these notepads that we sell at Echelon Front for prioritize and execute now, next, later, and we also have some you wouldn't call it a journal, but like a plan. Sorry, a planner.
Yeah,
If
the
we're talking about
execute
planners,
planner. Yeah.
yeah, the I'm an idiot. The execute planner. And, I like how it has that, the now, next, later thing. And so, yeah, hey, something 90 plus days down the road is gonna be in the later, segment, but I would want one thing in each of those categories leaning up to that. So there's one thing I can do today. There's one thing I'm doing in addition to that one thing each day. There's a bigger thing throughout the week that I'm doing that aligns me with that 90-day thing. Because some of those, I mean, you have to understand, like things that you're doing 90 days down the road, it's going to be a bigger task. So you have to start, you have to start doing something now. Now I know some people are like, well, I better use my time, get the stuff done right now that I can benefit from. And then, hey, when crunch time comes down, I'll just have to execute that stuff and make that my number one focus. Okay. There are people that can operate that way. Um, and they're good at it, and maybe they're the ones where it's like, hey, when the pressure's there, my back's against the wall, I perform at a high level. I just don't see that as being sustainable, and to me, that's that's just procrastination and not doing like what you should do. And I know I'm guilty of that because I have a lot of things going on. I'm like, cool, I can do all these things right now. I'll push that back. And when it comes time, boom, I execute those things. But at what cost? Do I get it done? Yeah. But at what cost? The cost of my family, my marriage. Do I stress out a coworker? Do I stress out a peer? Do I stress out my boss? Do I stress out my wife? Do I stress out my friend? You know what I mean? Like there's a cost with delaying and putting stuff off. You just have to figure out like, uh, what that cost is it worth it? And because there is a time and place where you might have to do that, but that's not a sustainable thing that we should be doing every single day. To me, that's just laziness. It's a lack of discipline. And that's why Jocko talks about discipline equals freedom. And that's why the Bible talks about discipline all the time. I mean, I don't even know how many references there is to discipline in the Bible. So, any of our listeners, if you'd like to look that up and make comment that would be cool. See what I did there, Lucas? Because I know
I
you're
like
getting
that,
ready to look it up, and I'm like, no, no,
putting
no.
the onus on the listener. I like it.
I
It's
mean,
good. Little participation. I never
yeah.
hurt anybody. Well, you want to get after some Q&A? You got anything else on preparedness before we hop topics?
Uh, you know, yeah. One thing. Hey, don't take anything we said as like an attack. Like nothing that we're saying is ever an attack against any of our listeners. It's just my perspective, Lucas's perspective, and our thoughts on that. And I know there's been some episodes like I've got feedback. Someone was like, they felt like I was singling somebody out. I'm like, no, I wasn't because I actually had no problem saying the name. of that person if I was, you know what I mean? Um, these are general things that we talk about, but it's more of like a, hey, these are all things that we can get better at. Like I haven't listened to Jocko's podcast and ever thought, oh man, is he talking about me and got upset or frustrated? If I've ever thought, is he talking about me? Guess what? Then he was. Maybe he wasn't specifically talking about JP at that moment, but if I feel like it applied to me, guess what? It was what I needed to hear. And so we have to also open our minds to like, quit taking so much dang offense to everything that's out there. People just need to be a little more level headed. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when we get into these situations where we're stressed out with, the heat or loss of power or, resources running thin, people get stressed out. Therefore, they get emotional. They don't make the best type of logical decisions. Um, and that is because it's a lack of preparation and confidence in your abilities. But yeah, I love dive into this book more. Love to have Mike Glover on here as a guest. I know my buddy Brett, I'm sorry, our buddy Brett, actually worked with Mike Glover. Had did some
Oh,
training
right on.
with him at Fieldcraft, and then also was training jujitsu up at one of his places. I think about people that are prepared for whatever, like Brent's one of those guys. Yeah. Um, and it's also good to have people like that in your life that help you level up those different aspects of your life.
100%. All right, you ready for some questions?
Yeah.
All right, so this one is kind of along the lines of preparedness because I think there might be something about that in this answer. Yeah, how do you build relationships with others while also competing for resources?
How do you build relationships with others while also competing with resources?
Yeah, also competing for resources. I guess this person's in an environment where they want to build relationships with another person or another department, but they're all competing for the same resources in order to get done the projects that they have to do.
Okay. Well, that comes down to alignment, unity, and an understanding of like one team, one fight, which we talk about in the first law of combat, cover and move. Um, but I would also challenge you to really evaluate, are you really are you actually in a legitimate competition for all the resources, or is it for the ones that you want? And so that would be my first step. So if I was actually talking with this person, I'd be like, hey, explain to me this scenario. What's going on? Because I think a lot of times people make things bigger or worse than they actually are inside their head. And this person's saying, well, we're competing for resources to be able to, accomplish the mission, get the job done. If that's true, that's a really big issue and a red flag within your organization. Now, is there a time where we do have limited resources and not everybody is going to get what they need for the time being? Yes, absolutely. That would happen to us in the SEAL teams. But it comes down to understanding the different priorities of different units within and departments and teams within an organization and asking yourself, okay, hey, do I need this? Am I Could my team, benefit the most from it, which would help the organization get what they need and would also help the other teams get what they need? And if you can say yes, then I would say, all right, formulate a plan to articulate that and to plead your case as to why you need these like these resources above everybody else. But I think when people start to do that and they start asking the other people that they're working with in regards to what resources they need, why they need them, how would it benefit them, the team, which is going to help the whole organization, that tends to shift people's thoughts to like, oh, they actually really need these, maybe a little bit more than I do right now. That's one of the things that's hard with prioritize and execute is the ability to detach from your emotions and recognize maybe your priorities aren't the top priorities for the actual organization. Now, another part to your question is you asked, how do you build a relationship? Talk with the person, ask them about their day, get to know that person. You can still do your job and they could do their job and you can still be competing for resources while building a relationship. That relationship isn't dependent upon you getting all the resources and you not having to share that. I mean, we have competing resources at Echelon Front. You know, marketing can only do so much for each department. I don't have, you know, nor like I'm not expecting marketing to only promote FTXs, and by the way, the advanced FTX that we're launching this year, and
Stoked
some
about
other
that.
projects that I'm working on. Like, no, guess what they also have to market to? Our LDAP program, and to Extreme Ownership Academy, and to the council, and to the battlefield reviews. Oh, and by the way, the biggest event that we do called the muster, so if we're looking at like resources for prioritize and execute, I know at times Cody and I's department, the Experiential Leadership Training Program, I know at times we might bump a little bit higher than normal, but most of the time we're not a top priority because we're not a large revenue source to Echelon Front. We were a smaller niche type of department of Echelon Front, which by the way, most of the corporate FTXs we get are by relationships with pre-existing clients and our LDAP program in that order. So guess what? The LDAP team wants us to do FTXs because when a client does an FTX, they recognize their shortfalls and their shortcomings from a leadership aspect. And then they recognize, oh, they actually need more training. We also do FTXs after a muster. This year, excuse me, this year, our muster FTXs, Lucas, are on the front end of every muster because of how the schedule worked for the musters. You know, and so since the musters this year are going to be on Thursdays and Fridays, well, we can't rent out a field on a Saturday. No field's going to rent it out to us, and it wouldn't make financial sense if we were able to do it. So we're doing it the day before. So now people get the perspective of going into an FTX and then going into the muster with this blueprint in front of them of all their shortcomings that they experience firsthand so they can be even more intentional with that time at the muster. So I understand like our from a priority aspect, we're not a top priority most of the time, which I'm fine with. It because guess what? I also know that if more individuals are going to the muster, then they will get exposed to the services we provide at Echelon Front. And when they get exposed to those and they engage with us and they do a keynote or a half day workshop or a full day workshop, or they go to the council or a battlefield review or they do an LDAP, then guess what's a part of the little pipeline that we have? An FTX. So maybe they get an FTX their next iteration. Maybe it's 3 iterations down the road. Maybe it's at the end of a year and a half LDAP program. It doesn't matter because when Echelon Front wins, we all win. And, it's just an understanding of like, hey, it, I will never be successful in business and in life or in my marriage or in my family if I expect all the resources to come to me. If I'm selfish, I will never win in life.
All right, so I got one more for you that I think we can knock out. How do you stay humble while also making sure the chain of command recognizes your contributions while competing with your peers for promotion? So how do you
That's
stay humble? Make sure people know what you're doing while competing against your peers for promotion.
well, informing your team and your leadership of the tasks that are being completed should be a normal practice, anyways. Like, Leif knows what I'm doing. Jocko knows what I'm doing. Dave and Jamie know what I'm doing, even though I don't report to them. Dave, Jamie, and I are all peers. I report to Leif and then Jocko. And so, but we're all aware of what we do at Echelon Front. And so we have open lines of communication amongst the executive leadership team. I have open lines of communication with Cody and his team and Danny and his team that he's building out for all of our first responder programs that we have going on this year. Um, and so to m to me, this is like it's just like a no-brainer answer to me, but I also realize it's not common sense. Not so much common sense, sorry. I also realize it's not common practice in organizations to be regularly feeding information to their peers and also to their leadership. You gotta think about it, like, if I'm working on a big project and you're my boss, do you as my boss, to be able to properly support me, Lucas, would you need regular updates if I was working on a 6-month project, or would you just expect and need updates at the very end of the 6 months?
Bro, we've got to have periodic updates, right?
Why?
And the more frequent, the better.
The more frequent, the better, because that allows you as my boss to guide me, to also communicate with me, maybe changes of resources, changes of priorities. So you can't help me if you don't know about it. And so I, as an individual and as a leader, have to be regularly communicating with my leadership of what I have going on, what I'm accomplishing, and also, your company should have KPIs set up, and if not, sit down with your leadership and ask them what KPIs you should be hitting, but also have a list of your own KPIs that you feel like you should be hitting that align with your goals within that organization. Sit down, talk with your leadership, talk with HR, because if you have a good HR department, they should be aware of KPIs and they can help you deliver. They can help you um, establish them. And then guess what? When you're hitting your KPIs, that's an indicator to your leadership that you're doing your job. And if I'm hitting my KPIs and you're not, that's a problem also, because I also need to be able to help you out when needed. Like if you're in an opposing or not opposing, I don't want like to say that word when it comes to business. If you're in a different department and if you're not hitting your KPIs, that's a problem because I don't want another department within my organization to fail. So for me, it's a mindset of one team, one fight. We have to have unity. We have to alignment. And if I'm communicating to my leadership the job that I'm getting done, then okay. If I'm due for a promotion, cool. If I didn't do what I needed for a promotion, then I don't deserve it.
I I think there's something that you said is so important about that is making sure to communicate KPIs. So your key performance indicators are so important to your leadership because oftentimes, especially if you're in an, a middle management, whether it's upper, like mid, or low mid, that there is somebody above you that's looking at those KPIs. And if you are being consistent in your communication with your boss about those things, then your supervisor will know your process and also you'll know what they're expecting because there are some people that in a setup where you may not hit any of your KPIs until the last day of the month, but when you hit them, then maybe you've got like 110% conversion rate on whatever that key performance indicator is,
Yeah.
and there are other people who will hit on the Wednesday of every week that's when that's their day for maybe that's the day that they close deals or maybe that's the day when they're doing X, Y, or Z. And so their KPI may be one that builds, that like, okay, so at the end of the first week it's 25% and then it's 20%. And by the end of the month, they're 80 to 95% of their KPI. So when you're communicating up the chain of command about the accomplishments that you make, it also allows your boss to know what your process is so that when their supervisors coming to them, it's like, hey, I don't know where you guys are at for your month. And he can say, hey, listen, I got confidence that we're going to do this because this guy closes all of his deals the last week. These others give us a little bit of cushion because they're closing week to week. This guy tries to close, Tuesdays and Thursdays on his stuff. If you don't have that, then the pressure from above
Yeah.
and the likelihood that they think you aren't worthy of a promotion because like, hey, he doesn't turn in his numbers till the end of the month, not knowing what your process is, if you're not giving them those updates and those kinds of
Yeah.
things, they've got no relationship with you, then you've positioned yourself outside of being part of the promotable pool
Yeah.
because you've decided not to
Yeah.
communicate.
I was looking through the book I read, The Wisdom of the Bullfrog. I know we referred to it a few episodes ago.
Yeah, yeah, a while
And
back.
I was actually looking through some of the like little highlighted things that I had in it earlier today. And of course, it's awesome that we're talking about this right now. And it was chapter 14, expect what you inspect. And so as a leader, you should be inspecting your people so that you know these things. And as a member of the organization, you should want your leadership to inspect what you're doing to make sure you're staying on path, everything's good to go. And then also, guess what? When your leadership is inspecting your stuff, now they know you're doing your stuff. Like this is not like, okay, cool. So a few of the things that I've highlighted and then we'll close it out. But for the past again, it's a great book. Like you should really get the book Wisdom of the Bullfrog, Leadership Made Simple but Not Easy from Admiral William McRaven. Um Again, on chapter 14, one of the things I highlighted for the past 245 years, the idea of good order and discipline and the value of inspections has been a mainstay of every great military organization. And no leader of any good standing has ever questioned the need for inspections. I was like, ooh, that is good. Um, and then he's sharing a story about this. It's a great story. I mean, I guess I could read the whole thing, but um, actually, I will because it sets the tone, and I think it's really cool for us to kind of close it out with the story as well. Colonel Elliot Bud Sidner walked along the shoulder of the road, examining three 18-wheelers lined up bumper to bumper, ready to move out. Inside the cabin of the tractor were heavily armed federal agents from the Office of Secure Transportation, which, side note, I've worked with this group before. They're awesome. Um, Inside, the 53-foot long trailer was sensitive material being shipped across the country. For the past 3 weeks, Sidner, I hope I'm saying that right. Maybe it's Sidnor, I'm not sure. A retired Green Beret had been training the new agents in protective detail procedures, which I was just like, yes, I'm loving this. All right, back to the paragraph. Every conceivable threat of the convoy had been rehearsed: a terrorist ambush, an activist group roadblock, a vehicle breakdown. Every officer had specific responsibilities for each scenario. Talk about prioritize and execute, right? Each officer, different priorities. They knew what they had to do. Nothing could be left to chance in moving this dangerous cargo. But training was over now. This was a real mission. Sidner had relinquished oversight of the mission to the senior federal agent, a police captain. The agent was now in charge and would oversee the actual movement of the material. As Sidner observed the final preparations for the movement, one thing caught his attention. At no time had the captain conducted a personal inspection of each guard on the truck. He approached the agent and tactfully said, "I'm sorry, Captain, but I noticed that you didn't conduct a personal inspection of your troops." The captain, looking somewhat annoyed, rolled his eyes and said, "Well, Colonel, we're all professionals here. There's no need for an inspection." So I had that highlighted, and right next to it, I just wrote down complacency and ego. Sidner, a man of quiet disposition, but with a pinch hat for detailed, responded pointedly, "Well, Captain, if you were a real professional, you would understand the value of an inspection." And I just highlighted that and I wrote discipline and being a professional. The captain paused, remembering the service of the man in front of him, who he was a very highly decorated Green Beret, by the way. Um, and within minutes, each agent was lined up as a captain went by man to man to ensure all their equipment was in place and operational. The captain knew, and this is where I love, right? He had a little bit of ego, but then he shows humility. The captain knew that if anybody understood the value of an inspection, it was Bud Sidnor. And he went on to give a little background about Elliot Bud Sidnor, about what he did in Vietnam and all these other things. You know, one of the raids that he organized and ran was one of the boldest, most complex operations in modern military history. Um, and then a few other things I've highlighted. Every military in the world understands the significance of an inspection. Goes on to say, but too often in the corporate world, we give it less attention than we should. While every CEO appreciates the internal and external audits to verify the financial status of that company, the same rigor is not always applied to the other core elements of their firm, w- which is often lost in the positive effect that inspections can have on morale. Inspections are not just about ensuring compliance, inspections force a level of discipline into the corporate system. And when discipline is applied, the rank and file know they are in an organization that cares about quality, cares about results, and cares about the hard work. Guess what? That means that they care about you. If your leadership is inspecting what you're doing, it's because they care about you. They want you to win, they want you to be successful. And then he goes on to say, no one actually loves to be inspected, but every professional appreciates knowing that someone above them cares about the details because it is in the details that businesses succeed or fail. As a leader, you must find the right balance between too much oversight and too little scrutiny. Left unattended, most organizations will get sloppy and undisciplined. It is human nature. Your employees must understand that their work will be judged, reviewed, inspected, and graded. It is the only way to ensure compliance with the high standards you set. While the troops may complain about too much oversight and too many inspections, they will also appreciate knowing what's expected of them. And I just love that. Obviously, I read a lot. I had a lot highlighted there, but I mean, just that alone is just such a good reminder that hey, we should be inspecting our people, but also if your leadership's not inspecting what you have going on, you should now lead up the chain of command, communicate what you've been doing, be open, be transparent, and ask for feedback. That's what I would do in this situation. I know we've talked about a lot since you asked that question, but that's what I would do. I would present to my leadership, hey, here's what I have going on. Here's what I'm doing. Here's my timelines. Here's all the things and just make sure you have alignment with your leadership and then ask them for oversight, ask them for help, ask them for their advice. And that's the best way to have that communication with your leadership while also being in quote competition with other people for a promotion. Do it healthy and do it with the right mindset.
Dude, I think it's 100% spot on, and it's definitely what I found in my leadership, both with our uh, our more seasoned, our older leaders, and with our young guys. That as soon as we start to impose or enforce just a little bit of discipline in those checks, instead of them bucking the system, that they actually appreciate it because it helps them know what the expectations are
Yep.
and to be able to rise to it, man.
Which is what we teach at Echelon Front. This is what we talk about on the academy. Is what we teach at Echelon Front when we're doing workshops, keynotes. The LDAPs, which is the Leadership Development Alignment Programs, where we're partnering with the company. You also see and feel these things real time at an FTX. And the muster, obviously, we dive deep into it. The council, the advanced FTX coming up, the battlefield reviewed. Everything we do at Echelon Front is about teaching the leadership lessons that we learned in combat and how they can be applied to your life, no matter what you have going on in your life. So,
100%. And if you want to be a part of that conversation, you can go check us out on Instagram. JP is at JP Dinnell. I'm at Lucas Pinkard, or you can check out at JP Dinnell Podcast. You can get in on those Echelon Front Extreme Ownership Academy workshops that happen every Monday afternoon, or you can go be a part of this Extreme Ownership Academy online, where you can go look at how to implement the principles of extreme ownership, how to build a culture of extreme ownership, and things that are even more specific than that. Dave and Jamie have a great class on extreme ownership in the home and how to implement those things in your household so that not only you can be the best leader that you can be at home, but also so that you're teaching your kids to do those exact things. So make sure that you go check out echelonfront.com, go follow at echelonfront, or text, or sorry, not text, email info at echelonfront.com if you want JP or any of the other incredible leaders that they have there. We talked about Corey Mize a little bit, who does leadership training. We've talked about Cody Gandy. We've had Rob Jones on the show, as well as Carlos and so many of the other incredible leaders that are at Echelon Front. If you want to work with them directly, or if you want them to do some corporate coaching, shoot an email to info at Echelon Front. jp.com. Now, if you're with the folks at EF, then if you're following them, you have certainly seen Jonathan and Ann Montgomery, who help keep JP and I on the path. They're the couple that started first in nutrition. They're also helping out a friend of ours, Ethan Bernard, on his weight loss journey. If you realize, hey, you know what, one of the areas of ownership that I need to take in my life is over my health, go check out firstinnutrition.com/jppod. Jonathan and Ann are offering 4 free weeks of nutrition coaching to any of the listeners of the JP Dinnell podcast. And they're just phenomenal. Both of them are in the jiu-jitsu game. And if you want to be too, I encourage you to go check out Jesus and jiu-jitsu-usa.com. It's a ministry that both JP and I belong to. We do regularly scheduled seminars across the United States. We've got one coming up February 7th here in the DFW area. It's a reschedule with Victor Hugo, which we're super stoked about. He was gracious after we had Snowmageddon 2026 to reschedule with us so that we could get in some amazing training with him. And so we invite all you guys out to Six Blades Jiu-Jitsu in Keller to be able to do that. Man, we've talked a lot about the weather. If you want to keep your skin good during the weather, it's so tough, especially if you're in a moderate climate like where we are these days, where the temperature drops, where it's snowy outside. Man, they're rough on the skin, and you can help fix that by going to littlecattle.co, grabbing some of the beef tallow products that's there. You and your kids are going to want to go play in the snow. Their skin's going to be chapped on the way back. It's going to be dry. Throw some of that Little Cattle Co. beef tallow on it. It will help them out tremendously. And after you do that, you're going to want to get covered up. You're going to want to be in something nice and cozy. And what better things to do than to go grab some stuff from On the Path Printing? Get your logo on the stuff that you want to wear that will keep you warm, that will keep others warm so that you can promote your brand. So go check out On the Path Printing. Obviously, we talked a lot about preparedness, and there's no better way to be prepared for the things that might come or the defense of your home than going to check out the stuff that's going on at Bruiser Arms. So go check out at Bruiser Arms on Instagram. Those guys have custom gear packages. It's JP, Leif, and Jocko. They do custom training to make sure that you know how to use the things that are in your home. There's nothing worse than the guy that's sitting at the other end of the gym that talks about the incredible amount of toys he's got in his safe at home and yet has never fired one of them, doesn't know how to use any of them. A kid on an airsoft field is going to actually be more equipped to defend that guy's home than he will. So go check out at Bruiser Arms so you can not only get the gear that you need, but also the training that you need to go along with it. And that brings us finally to the end. Big thanks to Pete and Amanda Roberts for everything that they do for us, because these winter months are crazy and there's no better gear than the stuff over at Origin. I was out of my Origin work jeans in the middle of the cold and was comfortable outside at 18 degrees. Big puffy jacket on, and the Origin work jeans did their job. My Origin boots had 8 inches with the composite toe. Feet didn't get cold. Nice pair of wool socks on. I was good to go, even in the snow and in helping a couple of people push their vehicles out the other day. So it's awesome, the stuff that they're doing there. If you haven't gone to check out Origin, go to originusa.com. Look at this stuff. It's all American made, not just American manufactured, all American made. The cotton comes from the United States. Everything is loomed here. They did something that they said was impossible. And that finally brings us to the folks over at Jocko Fuel. If you want to know how we've maintained the energy levels that we have in the cold, it's because we got those discipline goes. It's because we're on that fruity cereal milk that just tastes absolutely like fruity pebble milk, which is the most superior of all milks. Is because we're using our creatine, and maybe we're doing 5 grams in the morning and 5 grams at night to help us get some sleep and with cognitive function. We've got all of those things, and there's so much more. You got the colostrum and collagen mix that's in there, which will also help your skin tremendously whenever it's in the cold. And then on top of all of that stuff, there is the new Molk cookies. If you haven't tried those yet, you're freaking missing out. They're absolutely amazing. If you go to jockofuel.com, use code JPPod20 to save yourself 20% on everything, all the stuff that you need for you and your family to stay in the game, to stay on the path, and to make sure that you are the best physical version of yourself as you take care of yourself and move on. Whoa, with all of that stuff said, JP, you got any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, I just I'll go back to through the things that I had highlighted in here that I've always known. I've always thankful for these reminders as I read these books or I talk with different people. Hope is not a course of action. Like you actually have to be prepared, And then I like how you said we have a responsibility to our families, our communities, and to our country to be assets, not liabilities. That means we need to train. But mere survival is not the goal. The goal is to prevail. That means recognizing the need to be prepared and then doing what is necessary to get there. So, with that, I hope this episode has been a reminder to go do the work that's needed, to put in the effort, which means to train, to build your legacy, and to never settle. This has been the JP Dinnell Podcast, episode 123.